All right, so we're back and we're going to just discuss the chapters that we continued the last week. Elena and I were just talking about how some of these sections were just so good that we
Mhm.
read so much last week, and we just really felt like we would like to kind of go into a little bit deeper investigation really into the whole paragraph or whatever it is, because yeah, it was so good. So I'll let Alana go ahead, and I know she picked out a few, and we'll start from there discussing about some of these that we read.
And I know we discussed some last week, but I can't quite specifically remember which ones. But one of the things that I had highlighted is like when you spend time with others who appreciate you. I know we kind of touched on this one last week.
Yes.
When you spend time with others that appreciate you, it
What
stimulates your
page is
own
that,
thoughts.
Alana?
Sorry, page
What page is?
45, just under how to best utilize the
Yeah,
law.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yes, okay.
When you,
Continue, sorry.
no, it's good. When you spend time with others who appreciate you, it stimulates your own thoughts of appreciation. Beautiful, like that law of attraction, right? When you
Mm-hmm.
spend time with those that see the flaws in their perception of your flaws often become your point of attraction. So it's bringing that emotional attachment or bringing that awareness of the thing, and you're like, oh, now you're conscious of it. As soon as you move into that space of, oh, now like, you're consciously, and you're in that, what's the word I'm seeking here? You're self-conscious about it, right? You're judging yourself because of it.
Yeah, you're judging yourself. You've probably moved into some type of emotion regarding it,
Hmm.
right? Like you've literally attached yourself and like started questioning yourself instead of realizing that that was another's opinion or
Hmm.
that was somebody else's idea. I remember having a discussion with a friend about this because um, when you're when you think about what someone says about you, instead of allowing some emotion to come in, because right away we want to feel like either well we're not like that, or we also say, oh, oh yeah, I feel it, right? But what if you like could adopt a neutrality
Mm.
and just look at it and just think like, is there parts of me who maybe in the past or currently operate from that set point? And then, how can I change that if there is? Or then if you realize with neutrality that it's like, well, I don't believe I'm like that at all.
Mm.
That's
Yeah.
their opinion,
Yeah.
right? Like it's so easier to try and,
Well, and I love what you said there about the fact that we do one or the other. Generally speaking, we're trained to kind of either step into the defensiveness of
uh-huh.
like, that's not me, and
Mm-hmm.
reacting in that way, again, that emotional reaction, or the emotional reaction of, oh my gosh, that is me, and you bring that in. And so either
Yeah.
one, you're very much reacting versus responding versus
Yeah.
like what you're saying of really, what if I step back and I observe it? And
Mm.
what is this? Is any of this part of me? And really being neutral to the idea as like a third party looking, like observing those
Mm.
responses and being like, is that really me? Or is that their perception, which
Yeah.
totally could be? Or is parts of this me? And I know I've gone through this journey myself when we talked, I can't remember, I know we talked about it at some point, but I've gone through this process for myself in this a practice that I walk people through now is the sacred shift. And it's sharing, and it's a process that I've done myself of like, originally my thought was, I was not self-conscious. I was insecure
Mm-hmm.
about like when going back to my past, there was insecurities. And
Yeah.
so for me, that response, whenever I felt insecure, was defensiveness. It was pointed out to me a couple different times, and I had that observation of like, oh my gosh, is that me?
Mm-hmm.
But when I got neutral to it, I got to look at it and say, well, the reason why I was being defensive is because I was protecting myself, that insecure version of
Mm-hmm.
me.
Mm.
And then I could then shift to, well, I didn't need somebody else because I saw in the patterns of my life that needed other people to protect me. I was waiting for other people to protect me. And
Mm.
so in that observation again of the patterns of I've been looking outside of me to have
Yeah.
somebody protect me. And then now it's like because I could look at the defensiveness of like, that perspective of being, well, something within me needed to protect me. So it was defensiveness because that was the only way it knew how to show up. But if
Mhm.
you look at it from a different perspective, it's also courage and bravery and all of the things that I needed to protect myself originally. But again, it was through the observation process of looking at somebody else is saying, you're being awful defensive, to like really shifting and being observant of why. And I think what something else we're going to touch on is digging into the why is another topic we want to get to of these negative feelings. But it's not so much about the why, it's observing the and creating the awareness as to the feeling itself and
Mhm.
knowing that you can shift it, like you said earlier, about moving from that responsiveness to being what part of this is me? What can I release that I
Yeah.
don't really need? And what is this? Where is my strength in all of that?
Yeah. That's so good. What it what that brings up for me is a time when I was completely unaware
Mm-hmm.
that you were even defensive, what that even
Yes.
meant, what that like uh it, you're just so defensive and you're just so wanting to take your stand. We don't even realize that that's like a protective thing that we do. And so once I started having reflection,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like once you try to really see who you are,
Yeah.
then it's a little bit easier to allow yourself to see those, for lack of a better term, perceived flaws.
Yeah.
It allows you to see those perceived flaws within yourself. But when you said like, uh, then you see them and you can then turn the switch and say, how do you want to see them? How would you like to like have grace for yourself versus uh, crapping all over yourself or being
Right.
angry or frustrated because of where you were or what happened or how you felt, right? I
Yeah.
think like that's a really powerful tool, the reflection part, like journaling or something like that, and allowing yourself to look within.
Mm-hmm.
Because I used to be very defensive. I was one of those people, like
Yeah.
very defensive, didn't want to hear. And that's not me because you don't want to actually like relate to it,
Yeah.
right? And or you don't know how to heal it. You don't know how to fix it. That's
Exactly.
a really big part, right? You don't know how like even if you did reflect for 1 second and went, yeah, oh, maybe that is part of me. And you don't hate on yourself for it, but you just, that's the end of it because you don't know how to fix it. You
Well, I
don't know
think that
what the
was
next step is.
for me, that's where I was. Like where you
Yeah.
said, I saw the defensiveness and it was like, yeah, it was pointed out to me multiple times of people pointing out, it could be an observed flaw, or it could be, like you said, it's that automatic response or
Yeah.
protectiveness, or it's that survival instinct
Mm-hmm.
that we don't, how can I, it's the only way I knew how to show up. It's the only way I know how to respond. So it was really difficult for me to be able to observe the like how to okay now what
Mm-hmm.
step of like okay well I'm defensive great like I didn't want to take that on but I also didn't know what to do with it like you said.
Yeah. 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 For sure. Yeah. It's just allowing yourself to be aware that somebody else's opinion or their perception of your flaws can become your own
Mhm.
if you don't understand any of this process, right? Like
Yeah.
they can just become your own. And a great example is looking at our lives when we're children.
Yeah.
If people in our lives, parents, teachers, babysitters, people who spend a lot of time in our lives, have an opinion or share their opinion about us when we were little, it then becomes our own because that's how our minds work, right? So, yeah, it's just becoming aware.
And even going back to what it says, what Abraham shared here later is like it's much easier to change the direction of thoughts in the early stages of thought before you get gathered to so much momentum. It's the same thing
Mm-hmm.
in the patterns. Like this defensiveness is a pattern, it's a repeated pattern. We spent all kinds of time nurturing that idea. And more people bring it up. The when people bring it up, it becomes, like you said, that patterned
Yeah,
attention. It becomes
yeah,
more and more of a focus. But is it possible to change your direction of your thoughts at any time? So it's just a matter of choosing, again, shifting to that feeling of, okay, well, that's what it was, but what would I choose? What do I want to give my attention to?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I think the biggest part in here is we're discussing this, the book being the law of attraction, and anything gets attracted to us based on our emotional charge. And so when we're talking about like how we can perceive ourselves through someone else's eyes, is trying to practice that neutrality so that you don't attract more of that which you don't wish,
Yeah.
or even how you see yourself. So the emotions are what attracts. So if you can practice that neutrality, um as you said, that trying to change that thought quickly in like that, they suggest 17 seconds or whatever. But what's really cool is that if we move on a little bit, and
Yep.
on page 47 it says, how can a person overcome disappointment? Because I have a feeling that like when we're in that scenario of like listening to somebody's perceived opinion of our flaws, or whatever, there comes a level of disappointment, right?
Hmm.
And Jerry says, for the individual who's trying to make a severe switch in a positive direction of their whatever they're seeking, prosperity, health, whatever, success, if they had momentum going in another way, how much faith or belief would it require them to overcome? And Abraham says, you see, from your point of disappointment, you are attracting more to be disappointed about.
Hmm.
Again, those feelings, the idea of like really trying to practice the neutrality and not get emotionally charged, right?
It's like you can't get there from here. You get to the, and then I know Abraham talks, and I can't remember if it was in here or just other conversations I've heard from Abraham of like the momentum of the train. When the train starts going in one direction, you can't immediately stop it and switch in another direction. It's already going there.
Yeah.
The quicker you can get to that point of like recognizing the awareness that you mentioned,
Yes.
recognizing it and then shifting it to a different direction. It does take a little more effort or momentum, but it is possible. And like what you said about that creation space of like um you're you can't, when the train is already going this way, you can't
Yeah.
get from one end of that spectrum to the other immediately. It does take some
Mm-hmm.
time, but it is possible. And
Yeah.
it's slowing down. And what Abraham shares in here later is like the incremental space of like, yeah, when you talk about the rampages that they do is like, okay, I can move a little more up the emotional scale. I can move a little up
Yeah.
more the emotional scale. So if you're feeling in a very negative feeling, well, disappointment's lower than anger and frustration.
Mm-hmm.
Like you can go up that emotional scale one increment at a
Exactly.
time. You can't immediately
Mm-hmm.
just like switch, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So Abraham says here, disappointment is communication from your inner being, letting you know that which you are focused upon is not what you want.
Mm.
So thinking about the emotions where you're at, you're like, okay, well, I'm having some type of a reaction. I'm disappointed because I must be focused on something that I don't want. And if you're sensitive to the way you're feeling, then the disappointment itself will let you know that what you are thinking is not what you want to experience.
Yeah.
Just like you said, if you could. And so the whole idea is always moving away from an emotion that you have to move to something else so that you can relieve that feeling, right? Like, but you can't get, it's like people say, well, I can't go from immediately sad to, oh, pretend and be happy right away. Well, it's true, because really, ideally, you can't, right? Like you shouldn't. But what I love, what you were saying about the train,
Mm.
and that it create everything attracts unlike itself. So the emotion, disappointment would attract more. So that train gets going and it kind of creates a momentum. And that's why we can see that if we're disappointed, we could get more and more and more and more disappointed. And it ends up unfolding into like, you could be disappointed over spilled coffee, but then you're disappointed that you didn't have the paper towel available. Then you're disappointed because someone walked through it. And it's like a domino effect, right? What I love telling my clients is that I don't know if you hear this, you probably hear this and say this, Alana, too, is that people say you are the how to, it's always within, right?
Mm.
That's the key right there, is catch yourself in the moment.
Yeah.
That's the whole idea, that you are the person to fix it, is that you've got your focus on disappointment. You're the only one that can change that disappointment feeling. You've got to catch yourself in
Mm-hmm.
those few seconds, right?
And I think that's a really good point too, of like catching yourself. And it's like when you have a car, right? Same thing when you have a car. Like again, you're building that momentum. If it's like if you're going in drive, you can't go from drive to reverse. Like it just doesn't.
No, no.
But if you put your car in neutral, in that observation space, it gives you the opportunity to slow down and make the shift, right? When you're talking about it, going back to the old standard,
Yeah, yeah,
it gives you that opportunity to shift into a different direction, but you can't, like what you said earlier about being observant of like, you see this momentum of disappointment. How do we start the shift? Let's pop back into neutral. Let's like
yeah,
observe the feeling.
yeah.
Okay, where do I feel that in my body? How does that showing? Like, what's going on right now that I'm
Hmm.
letting control my emotions?
Yeah. That's such a great analogy. The car, the putting it in neutral, like if you're driving a manual, maybe
Yeah.
somebody who's watching this is like,
What?
neutral. I drive an automatic. What does that mean? But
I didn't
anyways,
I didn't put clutch in there, but clutch means a whole different thing nowadays anyway. Oh my God.
but no, it's a really great analogy. The idea of that, like, go to neutral, then you can, and that kind of allows you a moment to focus. If we carry from last week what Rosie was talking about, is like, don't suppress the feeling. We're not telling you to ignore it, because you
Yeah.
can reevaluate, which I guess ignoring it and try to pretend that you're happy would be like trying to like go from drive to reverse, right?
Yeah.
Really,
Well, it's complete
that's a great
suppression.
analogy, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. But if you go in neutral, you can just focus for a second. You probably in that moment might, if we take the spilled coffee for a second as an example, you might in the moment say, not a big deal. Like, you might be able to talk yourself out of it, right? Like,
Yeah.
there's that, just that moment of neutrality to put yourself there for a second before you reverse everything and
Yeah.
try to just look at the situation, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
that's really good. I like that analogy. I know that you wanted to talk about what's on page 49.
Yeah, so and you had talked, and this kind of blends right in. It's funny
Yeah,
how some of these sections they kind of jump over each other, but
yeah,
should I seek the cause to my negative emotions? And then that's where we kind of talked about is like, sometimes we get into this like talk therapy is such nothing wrong with it. But it's something that we're familiar with. So we immediately go to like, why? Why do I feel these deep feelings? I know I've done trainings before where it's like, ask the 7 whys, like to dig deeper.
yeah,
And it's not about so much that we need to seek the cause of it. It's like we said, it's really being the observer and feeling and seeing it, I think, as well. And what it talks about in here is like taking the power of the creative workshop process is is that the more attention you give the subject, the more powerful it becomes. The easier it is to think about, and the more it begins to appear in your experience. Whenever you are aware that you're in a negative emotion, it's important to understand that while you may not be aware of it, you are conducting a negative workshop. Like, I think that's a really powerful point of like,
yeah.
if we're not in the creative workshop, like think about your day. You got 24 hours in a day, and we spend how much time putting into that creative workshop and like being in that positive experience. And then
Hmm.
what are we doing the rest of the time?
Yeah,
Well, we're
yeah,
either observing what's going on currently in our 3D world,
yes.
or we're in the negative emotion.
Yeah, I think what's really important part that I'd like to add in here, look at us adding into Esther and Jerry. But should I seek the cause of my negative emotions? Well, I think if we understand that it's a matter of creative workshop that he's speaking about is our thought process.
Hmm.
So what we're thinking about is our creative workshop. You are the cause,
Yeah.
right? We're always the cause of how we perceive something on the outside. So if you're having a negative emotion, is it going back to what you said earlier? Is it a response or a reaction to something that you're either hearing, feeling, or seeing outside of you?
Hmm.
Because it's you.
Yeah.
It's you that is the cause, right? And but what they're doing here is they're giving you a tool. Abraham is saying that you can change it. It's just,
Hmm.
are you in a positive creative workshop or a negative creative workshop?
Yeah. And even the next section, if you go through to that, it talks about bridging the belief. And that's kind of what we just discussed around the, like, first
Mm,
we've built this momentum, we're going forward in this negative space. Well, we can't get there from here. We can't go from the negative to the positive. So how can we
yeah,
start building that belief or changing, bridging the gap
right. Yeah,
here to there? And so, like we said, we pop it into neutral, we put it into a neutral space where you're just observing.
yeah,
Then we start shifting the belief, or what they talked about, bridging the belief. Using your emotional guidance system, Abraham says, works best when you're setting forth continual, deliberate intentions of what you desire. So let us say that if you intended in your workshop perfect health, you visualize yourself as healthy, and now you're moving through your day while you're seeing your friends and you end up seeing the illness or you seeing something else. So you can't, again, you can't get there from here. You start going into this, building this momentum around the illness.
mm-hmm,
And then you start feeling the negative vibration of, like, you start resonating with illness. And how does that feel in your body?
mm-hmm.
And it's like, oh, your guidance scale is telling you, hello, this is where you don't want to be.
Yeah,
So then
yeah,
we start building, okay, so this isn't, and then they talk about getting into that bridge of belief is like, this is usually the time of year I get a flu. I don't want to get the flu. I hope I don't get the flu. Like, you're building that momentum the other direction. You're slowly going
yes,
from this, going like 20 miles an hour this way, to like incrementally moving yourself in the other direction to build the momentum to go the other way.
yes, yes. Can we just point out that that bridge includes and starts gradually how they say, okay, I don't want to get the flu,
Hmm.
but they don't stop there.
Yeah.
So on a regular day, we probably say, I don't want this, I don't want X, I don't want Y, I don't want to get in an accident, I don't want this, I don't want that. But Abraham doesn't stop there, right? It's like gradually moving yourself to the next. I hope I don't get the flu. In fact, there may have been flu seasons I didn't get the flu. Like
Mhm.
building up you, right? Making you understand that it's like just because it's flu season doesn't mean you're always going to get it, right? And it doesn't stop there. It's possible that this flu season could come and go without touching me at all.
Mm.
So if we take, for example, what people are viewing in their 3D right now, a whole bunch of plain
Yeah.
assignments, let's say.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, it's like, I'm not getting on a plane anytime soon. Like, I see all kinds of stuff.
Hmm.
But me, when I think about it, and I'm not saying that I'm perfect just because I can look at this scenario and fix it. There's lots of other things that I still have to work on. But this, I can wholeheartedly say that I'm like, but there's more accidents in cars and I could get on a plane and be totally fine.
Yeah.
Right. So this is how we can kind of overcome the fear, right, of
Mhm.
something. I think it's really important. Like it's not necessarily just disappointment, but people actually have wholehearted fears.
Yeah.
And what are you feeding, right? Like what is the creative process that you're speaking existence into your life about? Like,
It's a beautiful way to put it.
right? I think like, yeah, it's what are you speaking into existence with your fear and like take this process and work yourself through seeing how you're protected,
Mm.
right?
And well, even like you said about going back to the idea of, the plane crash of,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I could get into vibration or a feeling of these happen. Oh my gosh, these happen. I can create a fear around it. But how
Hmm.
many times have I flown and have never had an issue? How many
Hmm.
times? It's like the same thing with even delays of flights and stuff like that. Like I've gotten on flights where people are like, I've gotten messages from people that are flying home from the same location and they're like, delay, delay, delay. And I get home totally fine with like three
Yeah.
flights and no delays
Yeah.
because in my mind, that belief isn't there. So again, going back to the evidence of the past experience, like again, about the flu of,
Yeah.
flu season's here. But how many seasons have I survived without getting the flu?
Yes, it's true. It's
Yeah.
true, right? Like it's true. I
Yeah.
can count on one hand how many times. So I I don't have a fear, right? So it's like what just examine your fears and your worries about and maybe allow yourself this process of speaking your way through it, right? Oh, that's
Well,
so
and that's a
good.
really
It's
good thing too. Of like usually, our thought that just came in was
mhm,
usually a fear is created by a large emotional response to something. It's
mhm,
usually only a
mhm.
one-time thing that creates that. Like there's emotional response. How do we change a belief?
Yeah.
Repetition, time, space, repetition, or an emotional response. And
Mhm.
most of the time, the fears that we have are created through an emotional response to a large traumatic event or something that
Right.
it was
Right.
very emotionally impactful. So
Yeah.
we've created that attachment to that emotion in a very quick pattern, like a very quick situation. And so, like, again, how are we going to change it? The same way,
Yeah.
time, space, repetition, or emotional response. So, when you look at, again, a fear of something, well, maybe it's a fear of could be snakes, whatever. You
Yeah.
had some sort of experience that made you fearful of snakes, but how many times are snakes actually an issue? And you start creating that,
Yeah.
even if you take it and you look at it like we can, because like I said, with the airplane, I use my own example of how many times have I gotten delayed or how many times have I've never been in it, something has never happened. But even around that, it's like you can also expand that idea from how many times, like you said, how you're more able or more prone to get in a car accident,
Yeah.
or because how many times do you drive a car, or how many times are you in a moving vehicle,
Yeah.
percentage
Yeah.
wise,
Yeah.
to expand it even to like, well, how many times does it happen per, people, you know what I mean? Flights in the air,
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. You know what I feel called to say here, and there's probably a part in this book because it doesn't really touch on it yet, but the whole idea about if we take the planes as an example today, that people will say, well, I'm in control of my life. I don't want a mishap or an accident or lose my life. So I am not getting on a plane. But that would be believing that you can control every aspect of your life
Mhm.
because who's to say that you don't then get in your car and something happens because you don't know, like some things are out of your control. So it's really looking at it with a perspective of like reality, because you said the whole thing about a snake. So just because somebody else gets bit by a snake doesn't mean if you're going to be by a snake, you're going to get bit by it. That,
Mhm.
like, other people's reality is not your reality,
Yeah.
right? So because there's a plane crash, why would you want to believe that that's your reality just because you view it, right?
And I'm just trying to find, I know it was also in here, and I can't remember if it was well in the section we read last week or if it was earlier where it talked about the news.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I talked about that. Hmm.
Like watching the news and getting um
Charged by it, basically.
yeah. Oh, what's here further in where we were reading? On page 58, it was talking about there's no difference in whether you want the specifics of it or not. The vibrational essence of the subject of your attention is what is attracted. That which you really, really want, you get, and that which you really, really do not want, you get. So moving
Yeah.
down that page, as you hear about statistics of what percentage of your population are robbed this year, you must understand that the numbers are so high and getting higher because so many people are being stimulated by the thought. These warnings do not protect you from the robberies, but instead they make the more likely. They do such a good job of making you aware of the prevalence of robberies, bringing that awareness into your attention again and again, that you not only think of it with emotion, you expect it. It is no wonder that you get so many things that you do not want. You give so much of your attention to the things that you do not want.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that next piece is
That's
like, we
good.
would recommend that if you hear of an assault, you say, that is their experience. I do not choose that. And then you release the thought of what you do not want and think to what you do want because you get what you think about, whether you want it or not.
Yeah. That's so good. Let me read this last part
Hmm.
here. You came into this environment with so many others because you wanted the wonderful experience of co creating. You can attract from your population those people with whom you would like to positively create, and you can attract from the people in your life experiences you would like to create. It is not necessary or possible to hide from or avoid unwanted people or experiences, but it is possible to attract only the experiences that please you,
Mm.
right? Because we're using our senses to make a belief, our eyes or our ears, but you get to choose. You literally get to choose with your mind, not with your eyes and your ears,
Mhm.
right? You get to make that decision. This was so good.
Mm.
This
And
was
I'm going
so
back because, like I
good.
said, I feel like sometimes these sections kind of jump over each other
Yeah, back
and
and
then kind
forth.
of come
Yeah.
back a little
Hmm.
bit. Like, because going back to page 53, must I take the good and the bad, their good and their bad? To
Mm.
what degree are we part of someone, what someone whom we're associated with is attracted? Just kind of basically what you were saying, right? The
Yeah.
wanted or unwanted.
Yeah.
Nothing can come into your life without your attention to it. Most people, however, are not very selective about the aspects of the life that which they give their attention to.
Mm.
In other words, if you notice everything about someone else, then you're inviting all of those aspects into your experience. If your attention to only the things you like most about them, you'll invite into the experience those things. And it's the same thing as like you're inviting all of those different experiences
Yeah.
in as
Yes.
you're thinking
Yes.
about them all.
Yeah.
It could just, I want this and not this. So then you
Yeah.
again build that momentum around what you do want.
Yeah. And I like how she voices this creative workshop. Is
Hmm.
like, so you get to pick and choose what you want in your life and what you don't. You get to pick and choose in that creative workshop what you want, what you like, what lights you on fire, what you desire, what feels good, what so when you visually see something that you do not like, you can say you can just go over it. You can just not even add it to the creative workshop. Don't have any type of feeling about it. That'd be a great topic about
Hmm.
how we could do that because my immediate feeling is, for example, the planes. Just pray for the people
Hmm.
that they have strength, courage, they feel loved in their process of healing from it, that the families can heal from that, like leave the plane out of it, right? Like,
Well, and that's a really good, I've heard another one of Abraham's sessions that they were doing
mhm,
on the computer. It just reminds me, sparks that to my memory of there was a family or a friend of the family that they knew, a person that they knew, who listened to Abraham and the thoughts and how they talk about the law of attraction. And so it was I can't remember, I think it was a lawyer or doctor from the US. So they had access to their own private plane and they got in the plane and they were like, whatever. And somehow, for some reason, the plane went down, didn't crash specifically, but they had to very quickly go down or something like that. And didn't quite crash, but it wasn't normal.
yeah,
It was violent, like
mhm,
that type of thing. And but they survived. There was no one injured.
Oh,
And so it was a mother and daughter, and the daughter came back to the mother going, well, we believe in the law of attraction and we are very positive people. And we spend a lot of time studying this material. So
mm-hmm.
what about us and our vibration brought that on? And so
Mm,
the question was brought up to Abraham, and what they said in reply was that, well, you all survived. So
mm,
it's like you may not have been in the vibration that brought on the plane going down,
right.
but you were in a vibration of something supported you.
Yeah, surviving,
Yeah, and there was healing, like nobody was
whatever.
harmed in the
Mm-hmm.
process. So you were in
Mm-hmm.
a belief that you were not going to be harmed. You didn't cause the accident,
Right.
didn't cause the plane to go down. Your vibration didn't bring that on, but because of who you are and what you study, what you know, nothing happened.
Wow, isn't that beautiful? And that's a different perception. That's one thing that I really loved about kind of learning this material and studying it and studying myself is that you kind of believe that you should only sometimes you kind of believe you should only have one perception about that. It's
Yeah.
like, but that was an accident and that was so bad and da 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 da. But they could come out of it with a different perception,
Hmm.
right? You're allowed to have a different idea about the situation, right?
Totally.
You're allowed to have that idea that is good, uplifting, courageous, right? Not fearful or brave. You're allowed to have those perceptions. And
Well, and
um,
that goes back to what we were talking about earlier about
yeah,
somebody else and judging our flaws or something like that. It's like we could get into the idea of either one of those perspectives, but we get to choose what
yeah,
we feel and our perspective of the situation. Because everything in our experience is our perception.
yeah, yeah.
So we get to choose that. We can look at every scenario, every feeling, every observation, and we
Hmm.
can give it a different experience. It's our observation, our perspective is our observation of the experience. We
Exactly.
can change, like you said, we can change the perspective. But like you said, one of the things that made me want to bring that other thought up too was we tend to get into this work and we feel like, well, if I bring something wrong into my life, it's because I was thinking, again, whatever we focus on
Yeah,
grows. So then we get into
yeah.
this tied emotion of like, well, if I bring something into my life, then I brought that in. Why? Like, how did I do that? Again,
Hmm.
to one of the situations where I was talking about
The
somebody being stabbed or whatever, something.
yeah.
And it's like, how did I bring that in? Again, it might not have been your
It's not
experience.
always. Hmm.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
it's like, why did it come into my experience?
yeah. That's a
And
really
again,
good question.
not that we need to
Like
go
a
back into the
yeah, yeah,
why,
yeah, yeah.
but
Exactly.
why don't we just change, like you said, change the perspective of it of,
Yeah,
but because of this experience, I can take this from it. And how can it be positive, uplifting, not again shifting into the from one direction to the other, but
yeah.
empowering, giving yourself an empowering perspective of it.
Exactly. And I'd like to add here that I guess that's really where when we say there's no wrong or right,
Hmm.
because you're entitled to think and feel how you are.
Yeah.
It's more of the question internally is like, how do you want to feel?
Mm.
So the story you keep telling yourself and the perspective that you're having, does it actually serve you and feel good? Or is it causing angst, fear, worry, what, like it's causing you to feel some type of way. If it's not the way that you'd like to feel, maybe think about changing the perspective. That's really all it is, right?
Yeah.
One of the stories that I absolutely love, and I think I heard it from Tony Robbins, maybe I think a video or an event, but there's two boys. They're twins, and they grew up in a household of alcohol and abuse. Exact same age, same everything, right? Live in the same environment and everything. One grows up to be very successful and right? Like changed his whole environment. And the other one grew up similar to his environment and drugs and alcohol and whatever. And when they were both asked the exact same question, okay, you grew up in the same environment, same experiences, same everything. How did you get to where you are? And they both said the exact same answer. Well, what choice did we have?
Ugh, wow. That's powerful.
So one's perspective is like, I have no choice but to get out. And one's perspective was, I have no choice, but this is where I came from.
Mhm.
Like it, it's all perspective. It's
Yeah.
literally all choice. So somebody has the same exact experience being in an accident, a car, a plane, whatever. Two people can have the exact same experience, but have a different perspective.
Well, like you said, for that example, it could be like somebody could be traumatized and never want to get on a plane again. And
Mm-hmm.
another one was like, oh my gosh, look at the miracle of the fact that I survived and everybody's
Yeah.
okay. And, there was a couple of people,
Yeah.
whatever, like there's two
Yeah.
different perspectives there.
Yeah. Exactly. And so, really, I think what Abraham wants you to know is that how do you want to feel about it?
Yeah.
Not like one's right or wrong. You get
Hmm.
to choose. You can say, I'm traumatized and I'm never getting on a plane again or this or that, but how do you feel about that? Like, does it
Is it
make you feel
happening?
good?
Yeah.
Right? If
Feel
you're
good.
okay with your choice, right? If they're totally okay, but it's how you feel about it,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Oh, that's good.
Oh, this is good. This was so good today. Yeah, great
Mhm.
discussion and really, really like, again, offering our two perspectives to the
Mhm.
audience and believing that like you get to choose and like hope that we can just pour into you and you can hear uh, different perceptions, ideas, thoughts, and like how you can basically, if you're struggling, how you can come out of it and believe that you have the power within to make a difference in your life.
Yeah. That.
Yeah,
Thank
so
you
good.
for having me here.
Thank you for joining and bringing yourself and your knowledge and your beautiful you to the table. Do you have anything that you'd like to say?
I think so. I think this was so good. I'm excited to continue forward and continuing to have these deep conversations. It's so
Yeah.
good. And again, I hope people are listening, grabbing some nuggets. If you want to share in the comments below
Comments.
about like
Yeah.
what are your takeaways to solidify the thoughts, your aha moments, that'd be so cool.
Yeah. So good. So good. So join us again next week. We'll, I think we'll probably be reading.
I think so.
We'll be reading, carrying on from where we left off and more beautiful discussions.
Yes.
Bye.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
You too.
Bye.